Hey everybody, what's up? Next episode of Redstone Functions here. And last episode we've talked about these four basic functions: the NOT gate, the repeater, the OR gate, and the AND gate. And yeah, this episode we will go into a little more complex functions. And by that I mean we will go into saving bits. And by that I mean we will talk about rs-knowledges. Rs-knowledges are usually used for storing data, but they can also be used for all kinds of different things, like parts of bigger functions that I will show in another episode, or used for a door or something. And yeah, let's get into that, right? So there are many ways to actually realize an rs-knowledge. You can build them with pistons, with hoppers, with droppers, only with redstone, of course. And I will give you a quick overview over all of these versions at the end of this video. But first of all, I want to explain the basic principle. And for that, we will just build the most basic rs-knowledge. So for that, you place a block here and a block diagonally like this. And then you place a torch here and a torch here. And then you will put some redstone here and here. So you get this kind of loop. And you can see that the torches depend on each other, right? So when this torch is on, this torch is off, and it doesn't turn this torch off, right? It can also be the other way around. So when I destroy this bit of redstone here, you can see that obviously that torch turns on because that isn't on anymore. That turns this torch off. And if I replace this now, you can see it's in this state. Now, when I destroy this thing, it flips once again, and I can let that flip over and over again this way. But obviously, we don't want to have to destroy things, destroy parts of the function to make it do what it's supposed to do, right? So what we do is we need to give it some inputs, right? The inputs are called R and S, which is the reason why it's called rs-knowledge. And the inputs are here on these blocks. And if you have seen the last episode, you'll notice that this is actually a NOR gate, right? It's a NOT gate with more than one input, and that's a NOR gate. That's why it's called an rs-knowledge. You can theoretically build an rs-NAND latch as well, but it's far more complicated, and usually you build rs-knowledges. So now the thing is that now we can... the thing is that if you want this thing to flip, we need this torch to turn on, right? That means that we need to get this signal off. We did that before by destroying this line, and obviously the torch wasn't able to power that line anymore. Now we can do that by turning off this torch by simply giving an input to this input. Wait, what? By simply giving a signal into this input. That's what I want to say. And obviously that will turn off this torch. And that will do the same thing that we did before with destroying the block, and it will flip like that. And there we go. And we can do this. That was the wrong mouse button. We can do this once again here. And we can do that over and over again. Obviously we need some outputs as well. And the outputs are directly at these torches here. Right? You can theoretically have them here too, but you then run the danger that you override things, because this could theoretically act as an input as well. But here you have the isolation between these two lines, and that's safer. Obviously you can do something like that, and then the signal can't run back. But yeah, this is how it's built. And if you take a look at this, you'll notice that the outputs and the inputs are connected to each other in a certain way, which is pretty obvious because this is a function, right? And each function, the outputs and inputs are connected to each other. But what you'll notice is that when I turn this thing off, when I turn this thing on, I mean, for a tick or something, for long enough that this torch can turn off, then you'll see that this line goes on, right? It turns on, and if I turn it off, that line stays on. Same thing on this side. When I turn this on, that line turns on, and it stays on. Now, you can be sure that, for example, when you turn on this input, you can be sure that this output is on. Like even now, that output is on, but if I give this a signal in here, nothing happens. It only flips when you give it a signal here. Then that output turns on and that is off. And that's this saving mechanism, right? So I can say, like if I want to save bits, I can say this is 1, and this is 0 or something, right? And depending on which output is on, we have a different data stored, right? Obviously you can only focus on one output, like let's try this one. We can only focus on this one, and now the bit that is stored is set to 1, and when I flip this, actually I should give an input to the right thing. We turn this to 0, right? So you can say if we have like a RAM device or something, then we can say with this line we will set it to 1, and with this line we'll set it to 0. Now the thing is, I told you what happens when you activate one of the inputs, right? So when no inputs are activated, like right now, the RS knowledge will just keep its state. If you give a signal to one of the inputs, the whole thing will either flip or not flip, depending on its current state, right? But what happens if you give it both inputs on? In that case, this happens. Now you can see both outputs are off. This is not intended. The intention is that you always have one output on and one output off. And the 1 input, this, like both inputs are on, is actually an invalid input. Depending on the type of RS knowledge you build, it can do all kinds of crazy things. Like this one just turns off both outputs. But you can have different things like having both outputs on, or having still only one output on, or like having the outputs flip on and off, right? And all kinds of crazy stuff. And you don't want that. So both inputs on is invalid. You don't want that to happen. So when you implement them into some kind of computer device or something, you always want to make sure that you don't get both inputs of the whole thing on. And yeah, that's the basic principle behind it. So let me show you the different versions, right? Okay, so here we have the different versions of the RS knowledge. And the first one is obviously just the normal RS knowledge that we just built. The second one is this one, and it is already the most difficult one to explain for me. It's the most commonly used one in computer mechanisms and stuff though. So the special thing about this is that the input and output are the same. Like when I flip this thing, like when I hit this thing, this line stays on, and if I hit this thing, this line stays on. It's still the same principle that this one has, but it's not as visible. For demonstrating this, let me modify this thing. I'm gonna delete these two inputs and instead put them here, like this. And this is pretty much how this thing operates. So I just told you that you usually don't want these things as outputs because they can act as inputs as well, which is intentionally done here. So when I activate this thing, it will activate this line, which will flip this whole thing. Right, and you can see I activated this line with the button, and it stays on, just like in this one. And same on the other side as well, of course. So in this case, these things act as inputs and outputs as well. If I were to implement these outputs in that one, they would be like here obviously I've got to put that to not connect them, and I got to put this one here. And if I would try to put these type of inputs in here, they would go here and here, like that. So this is a quite special one, but it's very commonly used because it's only one block wide, right? So you can simply stack them like this, right? If you have a computer device or something, which makes them pretty useful. They are also obviously more space efficient than that one. And yeah. The next version is the piston version. So we have two normal pistons here. And when I activate this line, you can see that piston doesn't do anything, but when I activate this line, the piston moves that block. And we have the torches here, which power these lines if the block is above the corresponding torch, right? And that way we get the RS knowledge. Instead of these two torches, you could of course have a redstone block here, but that would use up more redstone. But you would use less space. The next one is the dropper one. You can see the dropper has one item in it, the other dropper does not. And when I activate this thing, nothing happens because this doesn't have anything in it. But when I activate this thing, you have heard this thing activate, and the item is now in that one, and that activates. Well, pretty simple. And the last one is the hopper one. You can see we have one item once again. The hoppers are facing each other, like the droppers. There. Yeah, that are the droppers. I've been confused. Yeah, so you can see they are facing each other, but they are both turned off by these torches. Now, when I activate this, this one doesn't do anything once again because this one gets the ability to put items into that one because their torch is off, but it doesn't have anything in it anyway. Here we deactivated this one, and that puts the redstone bit here into this block, right? And obviously in both cases these comparators notice that there's something in there and activate. And these repeaters are once again just to increase the signal strength, so we don't have only a signal strength of 1, but instead we have a signal strength of 15 to, well, be able to connect that properly to something, right? So yeah, that is pretty much everything I have to say about RS knowledges for this episode. I thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you want to see more videos of this kind, you can of course subscribe to my channel, and see you next time. Goodbye.